This time I'm going to talk about a life lesson thing that happened in my life. When I was younger, I was about 16. I was in my junior year. I began meeting new friends, and some of them were very, very good friends. I started hanging out more and more with them, and I began cutting class. I was not assisting school like I should have. I was skipping school just to go to the park and, chill with my friends and do nothing but just hang out. And as time was passing by, I began to cut more and more class. I stopped going until my mom found out and my stepfather found out. And they had a meeting with the counselor, and when they had the meeting with the counselor, they came to the conclusion that they needed to put me on this thing where they would have, every teacher would have to sign every time I went to class for every single class. I got the hang of it after a while, and I kept cutting class. I began signing the sheet myself instead of the teacher signing for it. I didn't get caught, but they were starting to call the school. This automated machine will call, not the school, my house. They would call my house to let my mom know that I was cutting class. But then again, I got the hang of it, and I began unplugging the phone. One time my mom caught me. I wasn't home by the time they called the house, and she had a conversation with me. I told her I wouldn't cut class anymore, so I began going to class again as I was supposed to. And then little by little my friends came around again, and I began cutting class again. By the time I was a senior, I already knew the system, and I was again cutting class, not going to class like I should have. And by the end of the year, of my senior year, they had a meeting. They called all of my friends and I, and we weren't know what the meeting was going to be for. When we were there, when I saw the people that I was cutting class with, I kind of figured what it was about. They told us that we might not graduate. This was at the end of my senior year. And we finally came to the conclusion that it was time to stop cutting class. We were final dependent. We had missed about 60 days of school out of, 180, I believe it is. And especially for my math class, I was in algebra at the time. My algebra teacher, who was a very good guy, he would tutor. So he started tutoring me so that I could pass the final exam. I realized then that I needed to give him my best so that I could graduate, because I wanted to graduate with my class. And the last day of school, I remember I went to class being very nervous after really studying and putting effort into it. And I took the exam. That was the last class of the day. So I was not going to find out until the class was over if I passed or not. And the same day we had the graduation rehearsal. And I wasn't sure if I had passed or not. After I took the exam, I asked the teacher if he could tell me if I passed or not. He told me he couldn't get the grades until about 15 to 20 minutes later. So then I started walking around, giving the books back to the teachers. You couldn't graduate unless you had all the books, and gave them all back to your teachers. I had missed one of them. So at the last minute, I had to call my mom and ask her for money because I had to pay for one of the books, which was my English book. So it was very nerve-wracking. I thought because of the money I wasn't going to graduate, and I wasn't sure if I had passed the final. And I remember going to the main office, just waiting to see if the teacher would come to tell me if I passed the test or not. I waited there for about 30 minutes, and the graduation rehearsal had already started. I was very anxious to know if I had passed or not, just so I can go run to the graduation rehearsal. I remember waiting and waiting. It felt like forever. And the teacher finally came in, and I asked him if he could give me the results for my algebra test. When he went to open his laptop to get the results, his laptop was dead. So now I had to wait until he got his battery charged. I remember it must have been the longest 5 minutes of my life, just waiting to find out if I had passed my test or not. Finally, he charged his computer, and he told me the good news. I had passed the final exam. I must have been so happy. I threw my books up. I was screaming. I was yelling. I was so happy that I had passed the final and that I was going to graduate with my friends and classmates. It was a life lesson for me, because I realized that I took for granted that whole time that I could have studied, could have went to school. If I would have went to class, I would have been a final dependent, and I would have graduated with no worries. But instead, I chose to cut class and I was being a bad daughter to my mom, and that wasn't fair to her. She had given me all she could, and I just took it all for granted. And I realized that studying was more important than hanging out with those so-called friends. And that is my story. I learned that, studying could get you somewhere, and I learned kind of late because I didn't take my SATs to go to college. I had to start college late because of it. But here I am now, and now willing to give it my best now that I'm in school, and that was my life lesson.